discrimination. Yet his connections within the department shielded him from facing real consequences. His smirk faltered slightly when he glanced at his phone and saw the hashtags trending worldwide. Still, he brushed it off, convinced of his invincibility. As the night progressed, Cole's confidence began to waver. The volume of calls pouring into the station, the growing media attention, and the escalating public outrage started to chip away at his usual arrogance. Outside the precinct, a group of protesters had already gathered, demanding justice for Eleanor. Their chants echoed through the night, a sound that even Cole couldn't ignore. Back at the hospital, Ethan sat beside Eleanor, his heart heavy with both fear and determination. As a former soldier, he was no stranger to facing adversity, but this was different. This was his family, his unborn child. The thought of losing them fueled a fire within him that he hadn't felt in years. "Eleanor," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "I promise you, I'll make sure he answers for this. You just focus on getting better." Eleanor's fingers curled weakly around his. "Be careful," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Don't do something that'll take you away from us." Ethan nodded, but deep down he knew he couldn't let this slide. As he kissed her forehead and stepped out of the room, he was already formulating a plan. He wasn't going to let his anger cloud his judgment. Instead, he would use his training, his resources, and the overwhelming support of the community to ensure justice was served. By morning, the hospital parking lot was filled with supporters, holding signs and chanting for justice. Videos of the incident had reached news outlets across the country, sparking debates about police brutality and systemic racism. Ethan, with the help of a few trusted friends, began coordinating efforts to gather testimonies from witnesses, secure video evidence, and reach out to civil rights organizations. The momentum was unstoppable. Ethan contacted a well-known lawyer, Alicia Grant, who had a track record of fighting against police misconduct. She agreed to take on the case pro bono, recognizing its potential to set a precedent. "This isn't just about Eleanor," Alicia told Ethan during their first meeting. "This is about every victim who's ever been silenced. We're going to make sure her voice is heard." Meanwhile, Officer Cole's world was beginning to unravel. Internal Affairs launched an investigation, and his superiors, unable to ignore the public backlash, placed him on administrative leave. But for Ethan and the community, this was only the beginning. As days turned into weeks, the fight for justice gained traction. Protests grew larger, with people from all walks of life joining the cause. The media covered every development, keeping the pressure on the authorities to act. Eleanor, recovering slowly in the hospital, watched the news from her bed. Despite the pain and trauma, she felt a glimmer of hope. Her husband's unwavering determination, combined with the support of countless strangers, reminded her that she wasn't alone in this fight. Ethan, on the other hand, wasn't content to wait for the system to act. Using his military background, he began documenting every detail of Cole's history of abuse. He reached out to past victims, encouraging them to come forward and share their stories. Each testimony added weight to the case, painting a damning picture of a man who had been allowed to operate unchecked for far too long. The turning point came when one of Cole's colleagues, a young officer disillusioned by the corruption in the force, decided to break the code of silence. He provided crucial evidence, including internal reports and audio recordings, that exposed the extent of Cole's misconduct and the complicity of those who had protected him. With this new evidence, Alicia filed a lawsuit not only against Cole, but also against the police department for negligence and systemic failures. The case became a rallying cry for change, inspiring similar actions in other cities. Eleanor, though still fragile, found the strength to address a crowd of supporters during a vigil held in her honor. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but her message was clear. "This fight isn't just for me or my baby," she said, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. "It's for every mother, every father, every child who deserves to live without fear of the people meant to protect them. Together, we can make sure this never happens again." Her words resonated deeply, igniting a renewed sense of purpose in the movement. As the trial approached, Ethan prepared himself for the battle ahead. He knew the road to justice would be long and arduous, but he was ready to face whatever came his way. For Eleanor, for their child, and for every victim who had been denied justice, he would fight until the very end. Human rights organizations and civil liberties groups who voiced their support. Public pressure mounted quickly, and within days, authorities were forced to respond. The mayor of New Orleans issued a public statement promising a thorough investigation, while the police department placed Officer Bradley Cole on administrative leave. However, for Ethan, this was only the beginning. Ethan continued to build momentum. He participated in interviews, spoke at rallies, and collaborated with community leaders to organize protests. The streets of New Orleans filled with people of all races and backgrounds, united in their demand for justice. Meanwhile, the evidence against Cole grew stronger. Investigators uncovered a pattern of cover-ups and corruption within the department. Several officers, emboldened by the movement, came forward as whistleblowers, revealing details about Cole's protection network and systemic issues within the force. Eleanor, still recovering in the hospital, watched the events unfold with a mix of gratitude and hope. She saw the strength of her husband and the support of countless strangers who refused to let her suffering go unnoticed. One evening, Ethan visited her bedside. He held her hand gently, his eyes filled with both determination and love. "We're making progress," he said softly. "People are listening. Change is coming." Eleanor smiled weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for fighting for us," Quinn answered. "I'll always fight for you," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "No one will ever hurt our family again." What? As the weeks passed, the case gained national attention. Celebrities, politicians, and public figures joined the chorus demanding accountability. The pressure on the police department became unbearable, leading to a full-scale internal investigation. Eventually, Officer Bradley Cole was arrested and charged with assault, abuse of power, and multiple counts of misconduct. His trial became a landmark case, shining a harsh light on systemic issues within law enforcement. Ethan and Eleanor's fight did more than seek justice for their family. It sparked a broader movement for reform. Policies were introduced to increase accountability, protect whistleblowers, and ensure that officers like Cole could no longer abuse their authority unchecked. Eleanor, now fully recovered, held her newborn baby in her arms as she stood beside Ethan at a community rally. The crowd cheered as they took the stage, their faces filled with hope and determination. Ethan addressed the crowd, his voice strong and resolute. "This is not just about us. It's about every family, every community, and every person who deserves to live free from fear and injustice. Together, we can build a better future." The crowd erupted into applause, their voices united in a powerful chant. "Justice for all! Justice for all!" Ethan glanced at Eleanor and their child, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Their journey had been painful and difficult, but it had also brought change and hope. Together, they had turned their darkest moment into a beacon of light for countless others. The movement transformed into a force for change, powered by the unwavering support of the community and the determination of those who refused to let Eleanor's suffering be in vain. There was little of the Mary Eleanor complaint against. She was one of a handful of captives who saw her banished. Ethan worked tirelessly, coordinating efforts with activists and using his military-honed skills to strategize and organize. His relentless pursuit of justice brought in allies from across the nation, each adding strength to the cause. Eleanor, despite her physical recovery, became the emotional cornerstone of the movement, her courage inspiring those around her. Local schools began holding discussions about systemic injustice, while churches and community centers opened their doors for meetings and events. The movement permeated every aspect of life in New Orleans, uniting people across divides. Artists continued creating works inspired by Eleanor's story, with her face and message appearing on posters, murals, and even digital media. Eleanor's public appearances grew in frequency, her quiet strength captivating audiences and fueling the fight. "Change doesn't come overnight," she would say, her voice steady despite the emotional toll of revisiting her ordeal. "But together, we can build a world where justice isn't a privilege, it's a right." As the movement gained momentum, pressure mounted on city officials to take concrete action. Investigations into the police department revealed widespread corruption, leading to several high-profile resignations. Officer Cole faced criminal charges, and for the first time, the system he had relied on for protection began to crumble. The Jacksons' neighborhood, once scarred by fear and silence, became a beacon of hope and resilience. Families, young and old, walked the streets with a newfound sense of empowerment, their unity a testament to what could be achieved when a community came together. Through it all, Ethan and Eleanor remained steadfast, their bond unshaken by the challenges they faced. In their darkest moments, they had found light, not just in each other, but in the collective strength of those who rallied to their side. Eleanor's fight for justice became a legacy, a testament to the power of courage, love, and unity in the face of oppression, whispered, sliding a folder across the table to Ethan. "I didn't know what to do with them before. I was scared, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy them. I thought maybe one day someone brave enough would stand up to all this. Someone like you." Ethan opened the folder, his heart pounding as he scanned the documents. Inside were damning pieces of evidence, internal memos, witness statements, and case files that painted a clear picture of a deeply corrupted system. This was more than just a weapon against Officer Cole. It was a chance to expose the entire network that had allowed him to operate with impunity for so long. Ethan looked up at Lucas, his expression a mix of gratitude and determination. "You've done the right thing," he said. "This isn't just about my family anymore. It's about everyone who suffered under this system." Lucas nodded, his hands shaking slightly as he took a sip of his coffee. "I just want to make a difference," he said. "I can't live with myself if I don't try." Together, they began to outline their next steps. Ethan's legal team would use the documents to file a comprehensive case, not just against Cole, but against the corrupt practices of the police department as a whole. They also planned to go public with the evidence, ensuring that the story would gain national attention. Lucas agreed to testify, despite the risks to his career and personal safety. As the movement continued to grow, the evidence Lucas provided became a rallying point for activists and community leaders. Public pressure on city officials reached a boiling point, forcing them to launch an independent investigation into the police department. Several high-ranking officers resigned, and Officer Cole was placed on administrative leave pending further inquiry. But the battle was far from over. Cole, now cornered, doubled down on his attempts to discredit Ethan and Eleanor. False stories continued to circulate in the media, and anonymous threats became more frequent. One night, Ethan's car tires were slashed outside the hospital. Another time, Someone threw a brick through their apartment window, a crude message scrawled on it, "Stop now or else." Eleanor, still recovering in the hospital, remained steadfast. She refused to let fear dictate her actions, insisting on being part of the fight. With Ethan's help, she recorded a video message from her hospital bed, addressing the growing movement. "I will not be silenced," she said, her voice strong despite her frailty. "What happened to me is not just my story, it's the story of countless others who have been ignored and dismissed. Together, we can make sure this never happens again." The video went viral, spreading across social media and gaining millions of views. Celebrities, politicians, and activists shared it, amplifying its reach and further galvanizing the movement. Fundraisers were organized to support the Jackson family and other victims of police violence, raising significant sums to cover legal expenses and community programs. Meanwhile, Lucas faced his own challenges within the department. He was ostracized by his colleagues, many of whom viewed him as a traitor. His car was vandalized, and he received anonymous threats warning him to stay silent. But Lucas found strength in the growing support of the community. At public rallies, people began chanting his name alongside Ethan and Eleanor's, recognizing his bravery in standing up against the system. The culmination of their efforts came in a packed courtroom where Ethan and Eleanor sat side by side as their legal team presented the evidence Lucas had provided. The room was filled with supporters, journalists, and community members, all watching intently as the case unfolded. The testimonies were damning, painting a vivid picture of systemic corruption and abuse. Officer Cole, once untouchable, now sat pale and visibly shaken as the evidence against him mounted. His attempts to smear the Jackson family had backfired, and his reputation was in tatters. The judge, visibly moved by the overwhelming evidence, ordered a full-scale investigation into the police department, calling the revelations a stark reminder of the urgent need for reform. As the verdict was announced, a wave of relief and triumph swept through the courtroom. Outside, crowds erupted in cheers, holding signs that read "Justice for Eleanor" and "End Police Corruption." The movement had achieved a significant victory, but Ethan and Eleanor knew their work was far from done. The hanging feather. The Jackson family became symbols of hope and resilience, using their platform to advocate for lasting change. Community programs were established to support victims of police violence, and new policies were implemented to increase transparency and accountability within law enforcement. Ethan and Eleanor's journey had begun as a fight for survival, but it had grown into something much larger, a movement that challenged a broken system and inspired a nation to demand justice. Lucas Harper, too, found a renewed sense of purpose, using his voice to push for reform within the police force. Through it all, the Jacksons remained united, their love and determination serving as a beacon of strength for others. Together, they proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, change was possible when people came together to fight for what was right. Listened calmly before responding. The truth is right here, and no amount of shouting will erase it. He gestured toward the evidence on display. This isn't just about Eleanor. This is about every person you've wronged and every system failure that allowed it to happen. The room remained tense as Ethan's words resonated. The evidence, meticulously compiled and irrefutable, was enough to shake even the most skeptical in the department. Among the officers present, a few exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the weight of the revelations and the possibility of their own complicity. Lucas Harper stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "I've worked alongside Officer Cole, and I've witnessed his actions firsthand. I stayed silent for too long, but no more. This department was meant to serve and protect, not to enable abusers of power. His testimony further reinforced Ethan's case, leaving no room for doubt. As the meeting continued, Ethan's legal team outlined the legal and ethical violations committed by Cole and the systemic corruption that shielded him. They presented demands for immediate action, including Cole's suspension, an independent investigation into the department, and comprehensive reforms to prevent future abuses. Outside the station, the gathered crowd erupted in chants as the news spread that the confrontation was happening. Reporters captured the scene, broadcasting the moment live. The public's support for Ethan's fight grew exponentially, turning his personal battle into a movement for systemic change. Cole, cornered and furious, attempted one last defense. "You're making a mistake," he sneered. "You think you can tear me down, but this won't last. People forget, and systems don't change." Ethan stepped closer, his voice unwavering. "You're right about one thing. Systems don't change on their own, but with enough pressure, with enough people demanding it, they will. And this isn't about you anymore, Cole. It's about ensuring no one else suffers because of someone like you." The senior officers adjourned the meeting, announcing that Cole would be placed on immediate leave pending investigation. The news sent ripples through the department and the community, marking a pivotal moment in Ethan's fight. As Ethan left the station, he was met with cheers and applause from the crowd outside. Though exhausted, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was just the beginning. Returning to Eleanor's hospital room that evening, Ethan found her awake and smiling faintly. "I heard the news," she said softly. "You did it." Ethan sat beside her, taking her hand. "We did it," he corrected. "This isn't just my fight. It's ours. And it's far from over. But for now, we can rest a little easier knowing we've taken a big step forward." Eleanor squeezed his hand, her eyes reflecting the same resolve that had carried them this far. Together, they faced an uncertain but hopeful future, determined to see justice prevail, not just for their family, but for everyone depending on the extent of the problem, and made it clear that Cole was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Ethan sat in his home office, surrounded by stacks of documents and glowing computer screens. His resolve had only strengthened since Cole's arrest. He knew that bringing Cole to justice was a symbolic victory, but the real challenge lay ahead, taking on the system that had enabled him. He worked late into the night, collaborating with lawyers, activists, and journalists to strategize their next moves. Lucas Harper became an invaluable ally, sharing insights and helping connect the dots between the evidence. Despite the danger he faced, Lucas seemed more committed than ever, driven by a sense of redemption and purpose. Meanwhile, Eleanor, recovering in the hospital, kept Ethan grounded. She reminded him of the importance of balance, urging him not to lose sight of their family amidst the fight. Ethan took her words to heart, carving out time to be by her side, holding her hand as they spoke about their dreams for the future and the hope they carried for their unborn child. The media attention surrounding Cole's arrest had sparked a public outcry. Community leaders, civil rights organizations, and ordinary citizens rallied behind Ethan, demanding accountability and transparency from the police department. Protest marches filled the streets of New Orleans, with chants for reform echoing through the city. As pressure mounted, the police department announced the formation of an independent commission to investigate the allegations of corruption. Ethan and his team presented their findings to the commission, ensuring that every piece of evidence was brought to light. The hearings were intense, with current and former officers testifying about the culture of silence and complicity within the department. Cole, now in custody, faced multiple charges ranging from abuse of power to conspiracy. His former allies distanced themselves, unwilling to go down with him. Public opinion had turned decisively against him, and even those who once admired him began to question the values they upheld. For Ethan, the fight was deeply personal, but it also became a symbol of a broader struggle for justice. He often thought about the other families affected by the system's failures, families who might never have the chance to see justice served. Their stories fueled his determination. Months later, as the Commission's findings were released, the scope of the corruption was undeniable. Several high-ranking officials were implicated and sweeping reforms were recommended, including the establishment of independent oversight, stricter accountability measures, and the dismantling of policies that enabled abuses of power. Ethan stood before a crowd at a rally, his voice firm but filled with emotion. "This fight was never just about my family," he said. "It was about all of us, about the kind of community we want to build, about ensuring that justice is not a privilege, but a right for everyone." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers a testament to the progress they had made. But Ethan knew the work wasn't finished. He looked out at the faces before him, seeing not just supporters, but partners in the fight for a better future. As he stepped down from the stage, Eleanor, now holding their newborn child, smiled at him. In that moment, Ethan felt a renewed sense of hope. He had faced unimaginable challenges, but he had also discovered the strength that comes from fighting for what truly matters. Together, they stood ready to face whatever came next, knowing that their journey was far from over. But their resolve was unshakable. Existence of a corrupt network within the department revealed a disturbing pattern of senior officers exploiting their power for personal gain. When Ethan shared this information with his lawyers and supporters, they realized the problem extended far beyond a single police department. This prompted federal prosecutor Daniel Armstrong to step in. Armstrong was renowned for his relentless pursuit of high-profit subsidy processes, having led investigations into numerous corrupt power structures. Recognizing the gravity of this case, he declared it one of the largest of his career. At a press conference held at the federal courthouse, Armstrong addressed the media with a solemn demeanor. "The evidence we've received indicates that this is not just a case of individual misconduct," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "It is an organized network of corruption, involving bribery, cover-ups, and abuse of power. Today our investigation begins in earnest." Meanwhile, as Cole sat in his jail cell, news of the federal investigation reached him. Initially, he believed he could remain silent and rely on his old allies to protect him. However, the situation quickly shifted. Many senior officers, fearing exposure of their involvement, began to come forward, disclosing critical information in an effort to reduce their liability. Within weeks, Armstrong unveiled a long list of individuals implicated in the corruption network. Among them were names once celebrated as legends within the police force, now exposed as abusers of power. As his allies turned on him, Cole found himself completely isolated, suspended from duty, and confronted with a mountain of irrefutable evidence. His arrest at the police station was a public spectacle, marking the downfall of a once powerful figure. Ethan, standing among the crowd as Cole was led away, showed no visible emotion. But when his eyes met Eleanor's, he saw a mix of relief and deep sadness. The trial marked a significant victory, but it came at a personal cost. After the trial, the Jackson family returned to the hospital for one of Eleanor's routine checkups. There they received devastating news. Due to the severity of her injuries from the attack, Eleanor would never be able to conceive again. The revelation hit them like a dagger to the heart. Eleanor tried to remain composed, but inside, she felt as though a part of herself had been taken away. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said, her voice breaking. "I know you always wanted a big family." Overwhelmed with guilt and sorrow, Ethan left the hospital room. He blamed himself for failing to protect his family. Yet, as he reflected on their journey and looked at Eleanor, he realized that love and hope had to be their guiding lights. Eleanor had always been his reason to keep going, and now, more than ever, she was his anchor. Returning to her side, Ethan took her hand and leaned down, his voice firm yet tender. "Eleanor, I promise you, I won't just fight for us, but for every family that has endured injustice like ours. We'll turn this pain into something meaningful." From that moment, Ethan's resolve deepened. The fight was no longer just a mission. It became a sacred promise to his wife and their family. Holding her hand tightly, his voice filled with emotion, he added, "Never apologize, Eleanor. You and our child are all I need. We've made it through this, and will continue to grow stronger." Despite their loss, the Jackson family felt justice had been served. Cole's trial and conviction were not just about exposing his corruption. They symbolized a declaration that no one, no matter how powerful, could escape accountability. The community organized a gathering to celebrate Cole's sentencing. At the event, Eleanor, with her characteristic courage, stood to address the crowd. "This victory isn't just mine or my family's," she said, her voice steady. "It's a victory for all of us. Those who've faced injustice, but never gave up hope." The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting Eleanor's and Ethan's names, their voices resonating through the neighborhood. Though the Jacksons could never forget their loss, they decided to focus on building a brighter future together. They planned to establish a support center for victims of police violence, envisioning a space where Eleanor's story would inspire others to stand up for justice. "We've lost something," Ethan told Eleanor as they sat together, their eyes brimming with hope, "but that doesn't mean we have to lose our purpose." As time passed, Eleanor's physical and emotional wounds began to heal. The trials they had endured gave way to moments of peace, moments they fought so hard to protect. One peaceful morning, in a hospital room bathed in sunlight, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When the baby's first cries filled the room, both parents were overcome with emotion. Ethan cradled the newborn in his arms, his eyes filled with love as he looked at Eleanor. "We'll name him Justice," he said, his deep voice trembling, "because he symbolizes the fight we've overcome and serves as a reminder that justice can always prevail." Eleanor smiled, tears streaming down her face as she gently touched her son's tiny hand. "Justice," she whispered. "We'll create a better world for you." A year later, the Jackson family transformed their pain into a catalyst for change. Using the settlement money they received from the city, they established the Jackson Center for Justice and Equality. The nonprofit organization was dedicated to police reform and supporting victims of violence and injustice, offering legal aid, education, training, and advocacy programs. The center aimed to build a fairer system for all. The center's opening ceremony was a monumental occasion. People from across the community gathered in a city park to celebrate with the Jacksons. Eleanor, wearing a simple white dress, held baby Justice in her arms. Beside her, Ethan stood tall, holding her hand tightly, his eyes radiating pride. Eleanor stepped onto the stage and addressed the crowd. "We've endured pain, but we didn't let it define us," she said, her voice strong and clear. "This center is not just a legacy for my family, but for all of you, those who have fought alongside us for a more just world." The crowd erupted into applause and cheers. Children waved small banners that read "Justice for All," and a sense of hope filled the air. Elsewhere, In a cold prison cell, Officer Bradley Cole sat quietly, staring at a small television. The screen displayed the center's opening ceremony. His face, once filled with arrogance and defiance, now bore the hollow expression of a man who had lost everything. Under relentless pressure from the investigation, Cole was ultimately forced to confess. His hollow voice revealed a staggering truth. Not only was he complicit, but the entire New Orleans police system was deeply entangled with organized crime. "I was just a small part of a much bigger game," he admitted. His testimony left the public in shock, sparking outrage and disbelief. It raised a profound question. Was it enough to target one individual, or did true change require dismantling an entire corrupt system? Cole's revelations triggered a sweeping investigation into the city's power structures, laying the foundation for a new battle. This fight was one the Jacksons and their supporters would inevitably face, a battle against a deeply entrenched system of corruption. As Cole sat alone in his cold prison cell, his eyes lingered on the television screen, watching the faces of Eleanor and Ethan at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for their new center. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of regret crossed his face. He realized that his hatred, arrogance, and abuse of power had led to his downfall. Yet the realization came too late. The iron bars of his prison had already closed behind him, and the future he once envisioned was now an unreachable dream. Back at the ceremony, Eleanor and Ethan stood proudly with their son Justice as they cut the ribbon to officially open the Jackson Center for Justice and Equality. The crowd erupted into applause as the red ribbon fell, symbolizing the start of a new chapter not just for the Jackson family, but for the entire community. Eleanor glanced down at Justice, peacefully asleep in her arms, and whispered, "You are our hope, and we'll do everything we can to make the world better for you." The Jackson Center for Justice and Equality began its work as more than just a support center. It became a beacon of hope and inspiration, a place for those seeking change and justice. Its mission extended beyond legal aid, offering education, advocacy, and resources for victims of injustice. The Jacksons' story became more than a tale of victory. It transformed into a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and determination could lead to light. Their journey was not just about justice, but a testament to the power of love and perseverance in the face of adversity. They had turned their pain into purpose, their loss into hope, and inspired an entire community to rise up for what was right. What would you do if you were in Ethan's position? Would you find the courage to stand up for your family and for justice, no matter the risks? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. This isn't just the Jacksons' story. It's a call to action, a reminder that justice must be fought for and protected. Share this story to spread its powerful message and join the ongoing conversation about what justice truly means in today's society. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay with us for more meaningful journeys ahead. Thank you. The end.